Baptist Heroes of the Dark Ages. And so in your outline, what we're condensing together is the look at the Dark Ages and then Baptist Heroes of the Dark Ages. Roman numeral 1, the Dark Ages. When we talk about the Dark Ages in Europe, we're talking about roughly the 6th through the 14th centuries. The 6th through the 14th centuries. Say a little bit about this before we start taking notes. This is called the Dark Ages for several reasons. It's called the Dark Ages because we don't know very much about it. It's called the Dark Ages because there's very little literacy and a whole list of things that make it look like it's a bad time. It's called the Dark Ages because it's a time where violence appears to rule because there's little government. I have my own sneaking suspicion that the Dark Ages were not as dark as we think. My own sneaking suspicion is that in reality the Dark Ages were a period of time when lots of people could get away from the mainstream of things and live their own life free and independent. They couldn't depend on government for anything. They had to defend themselves and so forth. But because of the dominance of the Roman Catholic Church, we don't have record of very many of those folks who were independent and flourishing during this time. We're going to see some exceptions that break to the rule. So you remember, the Roman Catholic Church is writing all the official records of history that we have during this period. Even what we're going to learn today about some of our Baptist heroes, we take from the Roman Catholic records condemning them for believing and teaching certain things. And when we read what they were condemned for believing and teaching, we see that they were believing and teaching the truth. So I do believe that the Roman Catholic Church brought a Dark Ages all across Europe because so many people couldn't read, and because they couldn't read the Bible. Because they couldn't read the Bible, they functioned without the influence of the Bible. But I just have this suspicion that there were a lot more people that had the Bible than we're aware of now who flourished off out of the mainstream of society. We're going to get little reports here and there of such people in class today. I've got the idea there's a whole lot more than what we knew about. I'm not completely sure the Dark Ages were as dark as the record of them makes them look. But one of the troubles in history is that all we can do with the record. You never have a complete record. All you can talk about is what records you have. And then you can make as many guesses as you want to, but the guesses are guesses. But my guess is the Dark Ages aren't that dark. When you read the historians talk about them being so dark, most of the historians' idea is, well, there's not very much government. That means this must have been a terrible time to live. And not all of us share that same approach to government. But anyway, let's list some reasons why these are called the Dark Ages. A, there's very little central government. Exception of Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire in the 9th century, there's just very little central government. B, society was centered on the struggle for survival. I mean, just come up with enough food, clothing, and shelter to survive. That's what people spent their time on. Society was centered on the struggle for survival. Now, I'll tell you, you read that in history books. Look around in the world today. We're so spoiled in the United States. I can point you lots of countries that have real big central governments and the people have to center their life on the struggle for survival. Usually because of government instead of spite of it. So I don't know that that's as unique a statement as the history books make it out to be. People didn't travel very far from home. The historians have estimated that in your lifetime you probably met less than 200 people during this period of time. People had lived in small villages. They were relatively isolated. They didn't travel much. I'm not so sure that's as bad, again, as they always make it out to be. Families had a lot of motivation to be close-knit and so forth. But again, you don't have anything that compares to what we think of life today. Most of you met more than 200 people before you got out of elementary school just going to school with them. You could have met more than 200 people at church last night in many of our churches. There was very little literacy. Very little literacy. Most people never learned to read. You find kings and rulers that couldn't read. Most priests couldn't read. By the way, most Roman Catholic priests during this period never saw a Bible of any kind in their entire life. Anything they knew about the Bible that showed up in their sermons was just something they'd heard from somebody. Now, that's the record of history. I tell you, I think there were probably more people learning to read with hidden copies of the Bible than we have any idea of. Because we keep getting these little windows and we find these groups, and they did teach their people to read, and they did have Bibles. And I've got the idea that there was, maybe this is not as true again as most of the history books say it is, but you understand the Roman Catholic Church purposely, consciously tried to keep people from reading. It purposely, consciously tried to keep the priests from reading. So what happens when people can read? Hey, when people read, they can think for themselves. I know some of you are still wrestling with the idea of reading not being very much fun. Okay? And during college, you sometimes really seems like it's not much fun because all these people get to pick your reading for you. You know, your professor, we were talking Tuesday about the importance of reading and the importance of preachers reading, and for a 4-year period or so, somebody else is picking the topics you read about for the most part. You know? But reading is thinking. It's gathering information. It leaves you free to think about it and evaluate it for yourself. Tyrants never like a literate society, because if you're in a literate society, someone can always write about what's wrong with the tyrant. I will tell you what's happening in our own country when people are losing the ability to read is not accidental. By any stretch, that's what the last newsletter I put out is about. You had the Roman Catholic Church purposely trying to keep people, even their own priests, from reading. If the priests couldn't read, see, they get in trouble along the way. Priests like Martin Luther start reading the book of Romans, and they get into all kinds of trouble. But when the priests couldn't read, the priests only knew what the people higher up in the church told them. And so they just repeat to the people what they've been told. Illiterate people are always a threat to tyrants. And officially, the record is that very few people could read during this period of time. Well, no wonder. The folks who controlled the mechanisms of society wouldn't teach them to read and would teach them not to, and would penalize them for it. I will tell you, it's not accidental. You get to Cuba today. Literacy is so low. Castro doesn't want folks reading. Folks can read all that messy stuff that comes over from the United States. Okay? But anyway, that's the official record history, that very few people could read. It's certainly true that Roman Catholicism tried to keep people from reading. D. Before you write this down, you remember we told you within the state church there is this debate between the school at Antioch and the school at Alexandria. Okay? And we said the debate centers over what text of Scripture to use and how to interpret the Bible. Okay? D. During the Dark Ages, Alexandrian theology took over the Catholic Church. During the Dark Ages, Alexandrian theology took over the Catholic Church. In other words, the debate goes away. The state church becomes firmly in the grasp of those that believe in a spiritual interpretation of the Bible, if you ever see a Bible. And the state church firmly begins to use corrupted manuscripts and use them with the idea that it's up to the individual, or in this case the church, to come up with its own interpretation. Okay? So this battle going on between these two schools of thinking in the state church, the battle dies during this period of time. Yes. Yes. This battle over theology between the school, what people begin to call Antiochian theology and Alexandrian theology, because of those two schools. The schools have quit existing, but those two streams of ideas, the battle ends in the state church and Alexandria wins. I don't care how you write it down, but the point is that during the Dark Ages, Alexandrian theology takes over the state church. The Roman Catholic Church becomes primarily a political power. Becomes primarily a political power. I mean, you reach a point where there's little show of spirituality. You have popes living publicly and openly in all kinds of wickedness. You have popes keeping harems and not keeping it a secret. You have priests just practicing every kind of wickedness and perversion openly. I frankly think you have that all the time. You have the Roman Catholic system. But they're open and in public about it, and it's not hidden, and it's not covered up. And you get astrology and drunkenness and even homosexuality being practiced in the open by the leadership of the church, all the way up to the papal office. Okay? And there's very little pretense of spirituality. And as the Roman Catholic Church becomes a political power, it gets intermeshed with all these other kings, and you find kings trying to take over the church. For a while, you find Italian nobles running the church. Then a French emperor, we go through that in world history. We're not going to get all the details of it now, but you have the French emperor getting so angry at the Italian nobles controlling the church that he literally sends an army into Rome, takes the Pope and all the trappings of the church, and moves them to France. And then you have someone else saying, well, that's not right, so they put somebody else as Pope in Rome. And so you have two different men claiming to be the Pope, and the nations of the world line up behind the two of them. And they literally start making deals with rulers. You know, you get the best deal, you recognize this person as Pope. That became so ridiculous, people began to turn away from the church in droves, and in order to settle that, a group of various noblemen and church leaders from around Europe came together, decided not to recognize either one of those popes, and selected a third pope. But neither one, and this goes on, this goes on for generations, with popes come and die and so forth. You have two rival popes, but when they come together to select a third, neither one of the others will step down, and you end up with three rival popes, each claiming to be God's only true voice on the earth. And as it gets more and more ridiculous, you come a time when, again, they're trying to put an end to this, and so they try to select yet another pope for everybody to recognize as pope, and you end up for a while with four rival popes. And gradually, the one pope is able to make better deals than the other three, and gradually destroy the power of the other three, and you eventually get back to you have one pope in Rome again. But this has become such a joke that you can get people to fall for a lot of things, but you can't get people to fall for everything. And the Roman Catholic Church loses its power. At one point, the Italian nobles were so tired of dealing with popes, they made a 12-year-old boy the pope. So they knew they wouldn't have to fool with it. Another time, a woman who successfully disguised herself as a man and rose through the ranks became pope. Okay? I mean, it gets ridiculous. The 12-year-old boy sold the office of being pope for 1,000 pounds of silver. Okay? Took his money, made the deal, and scooted on out of there. Okay? Which showed him maybe smarter than some of the adults that put him in a position. But I mean, it gets ridiculous as it goes on. Pope Alexander VI, Alexander Borgia, literally, not only did he have a harem, not only did he have children born, he was so open about it that just like kings and queens would make arrangements, you know, you will marry my son to your daughter, and I'll marry this daughter, and, you know, they make all these political arrangements. He did that with his children. Now, how would you like to have your daughter married to a son of the Pope? And, you know, just made a mockery of a religious system that was already a mockery. But Alexander was so open about it that they negotiated things that way. And Alexander had his own crew of poisoners that went around. If you created too many difficulties for the Pope, you had more to worry about than purgatory. As a matter of fact, you might worry about getting to purgatory sooner rather than later. And his daughter, by the way, is the famous Lucretia Borgia, who he married off to a nobleman that she apparently didn't approve of. And he died mysteriously. And she picked up some of her dad's talents, or one of her dad's agents or something. She just works her way up the ladder from one royal ruler to a richer, more powerful royal ruler to a richer, more powerful royal ruler, all of whom seem to die mysteriously. Okay? And it's been suggested that either she herself or she, you know, borrowed somebody from Dad's poisoning team, you know, and worked her way on up the ladder that way. But it just becomes a mockery. The Borgia family at one time was real famous. I'm surprised they've never done a miniseries on them on television. They seem to fit, you know. If you think Dallas or Knots Landing was interesting for all its intrigue, they could tell history with these folks. But it gets to be more and more openly mocked. F. The church in the Byzantine Empire officially splits with the Roman Catholic Church. Officially splits with the Roman Catholic Church. So you have the Byzantine Church and the Catholic Church then, both claiming to be God's true church. I've got to move quickly here because I want to get to some Baptist heroes during this period of time. Roman numeral 2. Some popes led the Roman Catholic Church to great moments of power. They led the Roman Catholic Church to great moments of power. Now, we don't have time to take notes about this. Let me tell you just that Roman numeral 2, some popes led the Roman Catholic Church to great moments of power. I don't have time to take lengthy notes on this. Let me just tell you a couple of examples so you get the idea. Pope Gregory VII had such power that he started this idea of threatening to send a whole nation to hell over the fallacies, the mistakes of the ruler. And you understand, if you believe that, how would you react? He actually threatens the Holy Roman Emperor that he will depose him from his throne and send his whole nation to hell. The Holy Roman Emperor defies him. Then he realizes his people are about to overthrow him. So he comes to the Pope asking for forgiveness, and the Pope makes him stand barefoot in the snow for 3 days, waiting for a chance to kiss the Pope's foot. Literally. And that's how much power he had. Of course, the same emperor later, when he'd consolidated his hold on his kingdom, came back with an army and ran Gregory VII off into the mountains, where Gregory VII dies, by the way, in a snowstorm, huddled out in the snow on his own. Pope Innocent III, what a name. This business of interdict, threatening to send a nation to hell if the ruler doesn't comply with the Pope, he issued 85 threats of interdict. And all 85 times, the kings and emperors and rulers that he threatened gave in and did his will. He was 85-0 in his battles with the kings of the time. That's power. Okay? But that's a good study for world history. I haven't got time to go into that into detail. Let's go on. Roman numeral 3. The Albigenses. Albi is really just a little village in France. But it became a center of independent churches. And pretty soon, all over France, there are independent churches, and they begin to call these the Albigenses. That name actually means these people know what the folks in Albi know. Albigenses. Independent churches. This is a movement of independent churches in France. Okay? Now, these churches were very clear in saying they did not split from the Roman Catholic Church. They claim never to have been part of the Roman Catholic Church. They claim to come straight from the apostles. Some of them claim to come from the Paulicians. Okay? Now, that becomes important to us because when people call us Protestants today, one of the things we're quick to say is, no, we never left the Catholic Church. We're never in the Catholic Church. And I'll say, oh, no, everybody was a Catholic till the 1500s in the Swiss Anabaptists. That is absolutely not true. I mean, it's not true. There are lots of heretics that weren't Catholics. There are all kinds of groups that weren't Catholics. But there are also people who teach the truth. And I'll admit, there's some people who were taught teach the truth that did come out of the Catholic Church. But there are also people who teach the truth that were never in it. And these folks were adamant that their churches were never in the Catholic Church. They were never part of the system. Some of them claimed to come from a group called the Cathari. That's kind of a shadowy group that we don't know very much about. But the word Cathari means pure. And the idea is that they were pure churches. And it appears that when they called themselves pure churches, what they meant by that is they were never part of the state church. We don't have a lot to tell us about the Cathari, except that they weren't in the state church. But we have enough about the Albigenses to know that many of these people taught the very same precious truths that we do. Many of these folks legitimately deserve to be called Baptists. Matter of fact, they were so much not a part of the Roman Catholic Church, they built their own schools. So they didn't have to send their children to the schools of the state church. For years, Roman Catholic councils would condemn them and send people to preach to them and try and get them to drop their status as independent churches and join Catholicism. During Pope Innocent III's time, he got tired of fooling with them, and he sent an army after them to kill them. So determined was he to stamp out this movement, he sent them to the town of Albi to destroy the entire town. Even though the entire town didn't belong to independent churches. In fact, a lot of people in the town were loyal Roman Catholics. But he wanted to be sure. They were so concerned about being sure to get all the independents that they put the entire town, men, women, and children, to the sword and the torch. The commander on the scene was quoted as saying, "God knows his own, we'll let God sort them out." You get some picture of the viciousness behind these people. They began to move through France, going to villages that had independent churches, destroying the entire village, including people who'd never darkened the door of that church. Some people have called this the bloodiest persecution of our Baptist forefathers ever, not because the largest number of people were killed, but because it was a scorched earth policy, kill everybody where there was an independent church, whether they were in the church or not. The people of this group that survived end up fleeing to the mountains. And most of them end up moving to northern Italy and joining the Waldenses, who you'll hear about next week. The survivors flee to the mountains, and most of them end up moving to northern Italy, where they join the Waldenses. Roman numeral 4. Around 1000 A.D., we have a fellow called Peter Abrurus. That's the name of the town. I'm sorry, there's a U in there. Peter Abrurus. He was an independent preacher, not a Catholic preacher. No indication he was ever a Catholic preacher. He was an independent preacher who clearly preached everything we call the Baptist distinctives today. He's an independent preacher, preached what we call the Baptist distinctives, preached the importance of teaching your children to read so that your children could read the Bible. Look around this country. See how many people have their children in Christian schools, even non-Christian, just because they want to be sure they learn how to read. When he got outlawed in a number of towns, he'd go preach in a town, they'd pass a law against him. He'd go preach in another town, they'd pass a law against him. He preached in French towns and German towns, and he got ran out of a number of towns. This went on for 20 years. 132. Okay. After this goes on for about 20 years, the Roman Catholic Church gets tired of banning him, and he's taken and burned at the stake. But by that time, there's churches being formed out of his converts, and they're called Petrobrusian churches. It's called Peter Abrurus because that's the town he grew up in. The Petrobrusian churches were real independent Baptist churches, teaching baptism by immersion, a separation of church and state, sole authority of Scripture, and the whole business. There became so many of them, the Roman Catholic Church called a council just to deal with them. Came so many Petrobrusian churches. The Roman Catholic Church called a council just to deal with the Petrobrusians. Roman numeral 5. Henry of Lausanne. Another independent preacher. Preached all over France and Switzerland. Henry of Lausanne. Saved in a Petrobrusian church, by the way. Preached all over France and Switzerland. The Lord blessed his ministry so much that whole Roman Catholic churches were converted and left Catholicism.
That what? The whole?
Henry of Lausanne.
No, you said the whole Roman Catholic Church?
No, whole churches. There were towns where the whole church, Roman Catholic Church, got saved and left Roman Catholicism and became an independent church. He was clearly what we could call a Baptist. Taught all the things we call the Baptist distinctives. Y'all remember the Baptist distinctives, right? Y'all all remember those? Good. He was clearly a Baptist. He was arrested by the Roman Catholic Church and died from pneumonia in one of their prisons. He's arrested by the Roman Catholic Church, died from pneumonia in prison. Again, those of you who were with us last night, a similar thing is underground prison, no place, no dry place. They put you in there. That kind of a prison will break your health and you'll die shortly. He died from pneumonia, but they put him in that prison with the intention of him dying there. And he did. Okay. But by this time, there's a lot of churches called Henrician churches, independent churches that were formed as a result of his preaching. Now, in the 1500s, when you get to the Swiss Anabaptists, which people keep trying to say were the first Baptists, the Swiss Anabaptists said that's not true. Their churches were not new. They had, because that was being said during their time. They said their churches went back to Henry, that they'd been around for several hundred years there in Switzerland. They went all the way back to the Henrician churches. Roman numeral 6. Arnold of Brescia. Rachel, got another typo on that same page. Remind me. There's 2 there, please. Arnold of Brescia. Arnold's sort of an interesting character. He taught all of what we call the Baptist distinctives, but he did it more as a politician than a preacher. He wanted to form a group of people determined to have a free country, to do away with the state church. Not to preach against the state church, to destroy the state church. Arnold of Brescia. Okay, again, common that day, you know these people by the town they came from. He's Arnold of Brescia. Brescia's a town. And so he campaigns for separation of church and state. I think he was a saved man, a good man. He held good doctrine. I'm not criticizing him. But I said his goal was not to go out and preach to people, get them to form independent churches. His goal was to go out and make speeches about separation of church and state and get them to overthrow the state church. And as you can imagine, he wasn't real popular in some areas. He gets banned from several cities and several countries. But what's fascinating to me about this, he then goes to Rome itself and begins to preach against the state church in Rome and convinces the people of Rome, and they run the Pope and the church headquarters out of Rome and set up Rome as a free city. Now, I'd like to tell you that's the end of the story. It's not. You can guess what the end of the story is. The Pope begins to travel around and recruits an army. But for a while, Rome itself was free and had separation of church and state. Unfortunately, the Pope sends a rather large army back to Rome. Arnold is taken, and many of his followers are killed. He's captured, he's hanged. After they hung him, they burned his body. After they burned his body, they made a point of strewing the ashes all over the river Tiber. They hung his followers. Some of his followers were burned at the stake. Some were drawn and quartered. They made quite a show out of it over a period of time, not executing them all at once, but one after another, after another, after another, with the idea of scaring the people out of ever doing this again. Lots of graphic reminders of what happened when you challenged the power of the Pope. But for a couple of glorious years, Rome itself was free as a result of what Arnold did. Well, he particularly had a lot of followers in the Italian state of Lombardy. Particularly had a lot of followers in the Italian state of Lombardy. In fact, so many that they begin to use the word Lombard when you talked about somebody that believed in separation of church and state. Even to this day in Italy, if you believe in separation of church and state, you're called a Lombard. But it was following Arnold that the people of Lombardy adopted that position. As you can guess, his followers that weren't taken and killed found Rome and Italy an uncomfortable place to stay. Many of them fled to the Swiss Alps and joined the Henricians, or they fled to the mountains of northern Italy and joined the Waldenses, who we haven't got to yet. But even though he wasn't primarily a preacher, I want you to see his political philosophy came from his Bible doctrine. And he wasn't a person who believed in separation of church and state like some people do today because they're against religious truth. This was a fellow who was a Bible student. He got this from the Bible. We know he believed also in baptism by immersion, everything we call a Baptist distinctive. Arnold is a real Baptist. If he had been successful, he would be remembered in Italy the way that George Washington is remembered today, the one that brought freedom to his people. Again, I'm not going to do this with you folks. I used to ask this question when I taught Baptist history about what was Arnold's fatal mistake, and the word fatal there is to be taken literally. And when I asked that question, what I meant by what was his fatal mistake, and that was he tried to establish separation of church and state by force. He tried to use military force to achieve this. And when you use military force, the issue is going to be who's got the stronger military. And if the issue was who can recruit the biggest army, Arnold or the Pope, I'm afraid that one's not a real hard one to figure out. But I had asked that for a couple of years in Baptist history class, and somebody asked me one time, said, well, what did George Washington try and do? That's a pretty good question when you think about it. The difference is they won the battle. They won the battle. And the point was, Arnold gave his life trying to do what was right. Okay? And that I'm not sure you can call that a mistake. So I don't ask that question anymore. Roman numeral 7. Berengarius. I suppose you want me to spell that. Berengarius. Yes. Berengarius. We don't know a lot about him. The only thing we know is that he was condemned by a Roman Catholic council. But just a couple of facts with that. I wish we knew more. He was actually in charge of the Catholic schools in Tours, France. He was in charge of the Catholic schools. But he started teaching what we call the Baptist distinctives in the Catholic schools in this town. Baptism by immersion of believers only, independent churches, separation of church and state. Anybody want to guess how well that went over? Okay. He was condemned by the church and spent the rest of his life in hiding. They never caught him, by the way. At least we don't have any record of it. But this is the thing that interests me. According to the council that condemned him, some of his followers formed independent churches, and they declared, according to their record, they declared them all heretics. According to their record, they declared 800,000 people as heretics for following Berengarius.
How many?
800,000. That's a crowd. Some folks have thought that number was made up, and I don't know, but it's an interesting statement.
What did them 800,000 do?
They left the church. Now, I will tell you, we look at numbers like that and say, that couldn't be true, could it? That this one man teaching these truths in the schools, or the 800,000 people leaving the church. Let me tell you something, we are so spoiled in this country. We have the truth all around us. We don't know much what it means to talk to people who are hungry for the truth. I want to believe that's a true number. Once I want to go with the Roman Catholic official statement on the subject. I hope there really were 800,000 of them. Okay. We get to heaven, we'll meet some of them, we can find out, I guess. Roman numeral 8. In 1146 A.D., the whole town of Cologne, Germany, was declared to be heretical for teaching baptism by immersion of believers only. Roman Catholic Council just declared everybody in town a heretic, because so many people in that town, which of course contributed a major word to our English language, that town, for teaching baptism by immersion of believers only. I'd like to know more about that story too. Yeah, in 1146 A.D., the Roman Catholic Church declared the whole town of Cologne, Germany, heretics for teaching baptism by immersion of believers only. That's pretty impressive. If there's enough of them, they blame the whole town. You couldn't call the whole town of Haines City heretics for teaching baptism by immersion of believers only. Again, we don't know much about that story. I'd like to know more about it, but that's what we have. But remember, who's writing the historical records that don't get burnt? Roman Catholic Church. I'd sure like to have somebody from that town's version of the story, but we don't have it. Okay. In 1165 A.D., yes, I'm sorry, Roman numeral 9. 1165 A.D., a Roman Catholic council condemns an unnamed group of heretics for teaching baptism by immersion of believers only. I'd like to know more about that story, but I don't. But you know what it tells me? There were still some people out there reading and following the Bible. This next one's one of my favorites. Put down Roman numeral 10 quick. I got to move quickly on this. How many of you know what I mean when I say Liechtenstein? Where is Liechtenstein? I know. Let's talk about that. Yeah, it's between Germany and France. Liechtenstein is a city of about 500,000 people that functions as an independent country. It is not under any national government. That amazes people when they find out about it. I want to tell you how it got that way. Liechtenstein. It's a city between France and Germany. It's the postage stamp capital of the world. All the European postage stamps are made there. The whole city, its economy is built around making postage stamps. I mean, it's just a little tiny for a country. It's a little tiny country about half the size of Orlando. And people have wondered, why is that an independent country? Did you ever see the movies? I don't know, they go back to the 60s or so. There's at least the first couple were sort of funny. They overdid it. But the Mouse That Roared and all that, about this little tiny European country needs money, so they decide to invade the United States and get defeated in war so that they could... The United States always rebuilds countries after they defeat them. So they send these 9 guys over with medieval armor to attack the United States. The mouse is Liechtenstein. Yes, Bruce? I think so. And they get here and they attack a nuclear facility and actually end up with a bomb, and so instead the United States surrenders to them, and now they don't know what to do because they wanted to get beat. That idea was Liechtenstein invading the United States. That's what all that's supposed to be behind. Real quickly, let me tell you a story. There are about 30,000 people who believe what we call a Baptist distinctives in Germany. They're being harassed and persecuted everywhere. In a little region called Liechtenstein, the prince said, if you'll move here, you'll be free to practice your faith without interference from the government. I won't let the state church hurt you. So all these people that believe what we believe today start moving to this area. And he protects them and refuses to allow the state church to harass them. And when Germany and France and all those nations are being formed under the Catholic Church, that city won't go under them because of its heritage of religious freedom. As more to the story, we got to take time to tell that story. We'll pick that up on Tuesday. Yes, sir. It's a city that is a country.